Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today we are doing a question and answer video. I put out a call for questions to come in. I had a few come in through YouTube, I had a few come in through Discord, and so we are going to run through those today, including answering the question about what has happened with me getting my Rolex Submariner. But that is not the one we're going to go ahead and start off with. Instead, we're going to start with a message off of Discord from David. I'm going to be looking off to the side so I can read these, so apologies for not keeping eye contact with the camera. And David asks, when does the weight of a watch become an issue for you? Would a thin, heavy watch be okay, but a thick, heavy watch be a no-go? I have never run into the instance where the watch was actually too heavy for me to want to wear. I'm not saying it's not possible. I could conceive of that actually being a scenario that people would run into. And there's definitely times where I would prefer a lighter watch, which is why I do have a couple of titanium watches. However, it's important, I think, to understand most people, when they experience watches, are usually experiencing stainless steel watches. And so obviously titanium is arguably the most affordable way to get something lighter than that. But there's a lot of stuff that's heavier. It's just not usually around the same price point. So we're talking the precious metals. So if you've ever handled a stainless steel watch and you've handled like the same model, but it's in gold, you will feel a significant difference in weight. Now, I've never run into the instance of that being too much, but I guess I could conceive of it being that way. But when you consider how many watches in platinum and gold come on full bracelets and such at the higher end of the price ladder that people readily wear all the time, and I've never really seen anyone complain about the weight, I think by and large, that's not an obstacle that a lot of people run into, though there are instances where I think they may prefer something lighter. Now, while you didn't exactly ask it, I will say watches can definitely be too thick, and it's almost regardless of the weight. But the worst thing that I've ever experienced in the sense of a watch and weight is if a watch is so thick, but its weight is so heavy on the watch versus, say, the strap, that it becomes top heavy. And I had a chronograph watch that was very top heavy. It was incredibly uncomfortable to wear, even though the watch itself wasn't some obscene amount of weight. The thickness alone really pushed things up over the edge. So I do think that it is definitely possible for a watch to be too thick. And the threshold at which a watch is too thick may trigger based off of how much it weighs. The next question is from Joe Bolt on YouTube, and he asks, what is a concept for a watch that you have? For example, I would love to see Rolex make a Submariner with a Tiffany blue dial and or bezel. I don't know if I would give you all of my ideas on things I would do, but the way you phrased it was a concept for a watch, and then used an example of an existing watch with just some modification. So I'll go ahead and do that. So I'm going to actually take a watch from the Breitling Premier line. You all are probably most familiar with the pistachio dial one. That's sort of the first one that I ever got the attention of. And one of the things I really noticed once that watch grew on me, because I did not like that green originally, was that it's a very elegant design that Breitling chronograph incorporates. And I thought two things. One, it should be in precious metal. It should be in an obvious gold. And they do that now. So they're so close. But the problem is, despite the elegance that the watch by and large has, those sub dials cropping out the hour marker Arabic numerals bothers me to no end. I cannot accept getting any of these watches because of that. So I would like to see Breitling take this watch that you see and actually just adjust the dial a little bit. And there are a few ways we could do it. We could shrink the sub registers a little bit, the sub dials. We could maybe just shrink and modify the placement of the Arabic numerals, maybe just get rid of the numerals where they're cropped and put in batons. There are a few things I think could work. A lot of options that you could do to quote unquote fix this watch. I know a lot of people love the way this watch looks, but for me, that cropping looks cheap. I've never been a fan of it. Looking like cutouts always looks lazy to me. I know it dates back to the pocket watch era, so there's a nostalgia to it, and these are very vintage looking pieces, but it's just the one thing that's always stopped me from pulling the trigger on it. And honestly, I never seriously consider anything in this line because I know they all look this way. The next question is also from YouTube, and this one is from Cloudkin, who writes, how come you haven't got the no date sub yet? Is it something you're no longer interested in? Or has the AD provided any other update? Shouldn't be too difficult at this juncture. Well, Ken, this is a very interesting question. So for longer time viewers of the channel, they all already know that I have been interested in the Rolex Submariner no-date version for a very long time. It is probably the most stereotypical sort of, watch that everybody likes that I actually do like. Like, I'm not into the Moonwatch. We're going to touch on that in a little bit. The Santos is okay. I had a Santos at one point, but there's certain just sort of iconic watches that if you were to ask AI, tell me about a famous luxury watch, you're going to get an example of. And the Rolex Submariner is the one that's always appealed a lot to me. I have not received an update from the AD. I have not expressed my disinterest to them in the watch, but I also have not been following up lately with them about it. Now, there are a few reasons behind that. One, because they haven't given me any feedback, I can't tell you whether or not it's easy or not in my area. I'm on the list with 2 ADs for it. I've expressed interest to 2 ADs for it. And neither of them have contacted me. So they're apparently, I would assume, not swimming in them, or else they would be probably going through those lists trying to unload them at this point. I don't think we've reached that stage in the economy yet, but I'm suspecting that we may get there. But separate from that, I've also not been actively going and expressing interest with the AD that I've been on the list for the longest. And the reason for that is when I started exploring getting another dress watch, which relatively recently I picked up a Breguet Classique, I still had the money set aside to be able to take care of the Rolex Submariner. However, as my collection has grown and modified, I'm sitting and I'm asking myself a lot of different questions that I hadn't been asking at the start of the year. I have a lot of watches now. I have 19. I have picked up, 4 watches this year already. Like halfway through the year, I got 4 watches, essentially. So I guess the Breguet was a little bit later than the halfway point. But I have that. I've got the Parmigiani I got right at the start of the year. I have the Citizen high accuracy quartz I got. And then I got the Baltic bronze Aquascaf watch all this year, and I haven't sold anything since the last State of the Collection video, which I did, I think, a month early last year, around October. So I have a lot of watches, so I'm not really crying out to add another one because I kind of feel like I have too many already. And that is a separate issue that a lot of you as collectors, and I'd love to see your comments on this, so feel free to comment them down below on this video in terms of like, how do you approach collecting? Is amassing okay with you? I keep telling myself amassing is totally fine. That's what collectors do. But on the flip side, in some ways, I'm more of an enthusiast than I am a collector in the sense that I like to wear all of my watches, and every watch, I have a few exceptions, but every watch that I add means less wrist time for everything else in the collection. And I start to notice how many dollars are in the collection and how many watches are in the collection. And I start to have a lot of trouble wanting to pull the trigger because it's like, do I really need 20 watches? The answer is no, I do not. I don't need any. But again, I'm not someone who has come from a background that bought luxury stuff. So to me, this notion that I should beg or have to follow up, just to have to follow up, is borderline offensive to me. It's just a lot of factors combined. If they called me this week, would I go and buy it? Probably, yes, I would. Have I thought about actually reaching back out and kind of pulling the trigger and saying, you have waited too long with me, take me off your list? Yes, because I'm starting to contemplate going in different directions because I'm now in an environment where I wear dress watches a lot more, not sports watches. So, and I've already got, 4 divers. So I'm looking at selling most of those. The collection's just sort of evolved a little bit. And I'm at a point where I'm really unsure on this, but I don't feel bad about it. And I know I'm rambling on quite a bit, but obviously it's probably a topic that a lot of you who have wanted Rolex watches have wrestled with to some degree as things have started to cool in the market overall for the watches at this point. I basically answered nothing there. So sorry about that, Ken, other than, no, I don't have it. I don't know why they haven't reached out to me. I have not reached out to them in months, though, so I know I have let my foot off the gas because I've been picking up other pieces. David asked another question on the Discord saying, why do you hate the almighty Speedmaster so much? Well, David, I do not hate the Speedmaster. I just don't like it. And there's a difference. So hate would be like a watch that actively repulses me. If someone were to give me a Speedmaster, I would wear it. But that scenario is not happening here. The reason for me not liking the Speedmaster is probably, in a lot of ways, illogical because some of the things about it are the same things that you'd think would mean I wouldn't like the Submariner. It's super common. Lots of people have it. It's a pretty boring design. I think part of it is if I was like choosing another sports black dial watch, I'd rather have the Sub. And even though the chronograph feature greatly distinguishes the Speedmaster from the dive bezel of the Submariner, they're still black dial bracelet watches, and it's just kind of like, I don't get it. I've never liked the 12 o'clock positioning on the moon watch. So just in terms of that, it's just a little too phallic, and I always thought it looked ugly, and the rest of the design doesn't appeal to me, and so it's just never made it on the list. But I do have to clarify that my general dislike is not the Speedmaster, it's the Moonwatch. There are plenty of Speedmasters that I've found to be visually interesting. The dual register ones versus the tri-register are some. Others that don't have those same markings of the Moonwatch. There's a anniversary gold one that I actually like the look of quite a bit. So there are definitely exceptions. But another thing to factor in for me is, aside from the visuals, and there are some exceptions. We've seen that people talk about them with like the Ed White movement and such. But broadly speaking, most of the mass-produced, mass-available Speedmasters, I don't hear anyone ever really talking about the movements in the sense of, oh, it's so cool, oh, it's so accurate. Not the same way you'll hear about like the precision behind the Rolex Daytonas or the pedigree behind the El Primero with Zenith. Or Breitling's even. Breitling's movements get more buzz than Omega's. And last question comes in from Jill Bolt on YouTube asking, what watch accessories do you recommend? I use my Rolex box as a remote holder because I'd rather enjoy it somehow than store it in the closet. Now, that's a good idea to take advantage of your boxes where you can. And the Rolex box isn't too big, so it's pretty convenient. I hate large boxes, as an aside. Omega, that's another thing. Your boxes are way too large. I get that you're trying to project this sort of high grade luxury via the box, but almost everyone else has abandoned that concept at this point. But anyway, that is an aside. So in terms of accessories, I recommend, if you like to travel with a lot of watches, I would suggest getting some form of a travel watch container. I have something very, very basic and I never use it because I usually just wear the watch, one watch, and I travel with it that way. But a watch roll would be better. So you could use a box if you just want to bring one other watch and swap between two. But otherwise, maybe look at getting a tri-watch roll. You can find them relatively inexpensively. You do not need to buy all the weird fancy pants stuff like Louis Vuitton boxes and stuff that are $4,000+, which is absolutely ridiculous. Speaking of watch boxes, though, I do recommend a watch box. But boxes just make it a lot more convenient. If you want to put them in a dresser drawer, if you want to put them in a safe, if you want to put them in a safety deposit box, you have some options depending on the sizes that you're looking at. When you have relatively small boxes that allow you to have a lot of watches in a relatively confined space. So I do recommend a watch box. Even if you're not going to put a watch on display, it just can be a lot more convenient unless you have a lot of space for the weird shaped boxes. And the third and final sort of accessory that I would recommend is get yourself a strap changing kit. But anyway, that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching it. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a like. If you want to respond to any of the questions that I tried to answer, do so in the comments below. If you want to support the channel beyond liking and beyond subscribing, you can always join the 99 Cent Club. And other than that, I will talk to you all on the next one. Take care, everybody.